A great book deserves a great title, and it needs to be specific, interesting, and give a glimpse of what the book's about without giving away too much. No pressure, right? Okay, let's break down exactly how to come up with some title ideas and potentially to choose the right title for your book. Also, I'm really excited for the back half of this video because I'm going to be analyzing book titles from recently published works. And so if you're nerdy like me and like analyzing things, then stick around for the back half of this video. The first step is to just start brainstorming. This is the brain dump. Write everything down that you think could be interesting or specific elements of your story that are really intriguing. This is going to just be a giant list of anything you come up with off the top of your head. Think about plot points, think about character, maybe your world building, magic system if you have that in your story. Think about those specific elements and what might be interesting about them. Keep in mind what feels emotionally charged for you and what feels like it gives a glimpse of what your story is about. So an example of a title that really evokes what it's about is The Hunger Games. This tells you a lot about the survival, competition, and stakes of this story. Number 2 is to do some marketplace research. So your title needs to stand out, but it also should give a little bit of an indication to readers of what the genre of your book is. So take a look at bestsellers in your genre, and then you can even filter down to specific comp books, so books that are comparable to the book that you're writing in terms of genre and tone, and see if you notice any sort of patterns with those lists. And this marketplace research is what I'm going to be doing later in this video, where I'm going to be analyzing specific genres and some of the top books published in the last few years. Step 3 is to try some fun challenges with the title creation. So you can put limits around what you're trying to brainstorm. For example, you can try and come up with titles that are just one word, or maybe 3 words. You can try and come up with titles that have some repetition or certain alliteration. Some examples are Pride and Prejudice or Big Little Lies. Things that roll off the tongue well and sound unique, or use certain writing techniques that would make the title sounds stand out. You could also try a challenge of writing a list of things. For example, we have The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as an example of what this would be. So just think of different ways that you can put bounds around your brainstorming, because this could help you go in a direction that you might not originally have thought of. Number 4 is to scour your outline. If you have an outline or at least notes about your story, just take a look through that and see if any certain words stand out to you or any themes that are important that keep showing up within your outline. This is kind of a quicker way to scan your story and jog your memory for certain elements that could be intriguing or interesting for a title. And number 5 is to ask for input. So you don't have to do this alone. If you have a writing critique group or even friends and family that you want to ask, give a few options of what title stands out to them the most. This could give you some real life data to see what is interesting to other people and would be a good title for your book. A question for you, are there any books out there that you just love the title of? What's one that really stands out to you? Let me know in the comments. Okay, so let's move to the title analysis portion of this video. And what I did is I took the Goodreads Choice Awards Readers' Favorite Books of 2024. So these are the final round nominees or top 10 books by genre. I'll put the list of book titles on the screen as I go by genre. And the first one I wanted to analyze is fantasy. Now, what I'm looking for here are certain patterns or things that I'm noticing that all seem to have a similar vibe between these titles. The first thing I noticed in the fantasy titles is there are definitive articles and specificity. 6 of these 10 titles start with the, which tells me that they're focusing on one specific element of that story. They're honing in on one thing to really highlight that's important about this story. And this will generally be something unique and central to the plot. Another commonality is evocative sounding nouns. So these are something that create intrigue or question or mystery, something that's interesting about these works. So examples are some storytelling elements like story, book, map, tale, some mysterious kind of objects like oracle, wife, and blades, or some world building terms as well like the other lands and empire. A lot of these titles evoke emotion or bring a very specific type of imagery to mind. So I noticed specifically like Five Broken Blades evokes some drama, danger, and action. Empire of the Damned adds a sense of darkness and stakes. The Blackbird Oracle. The Blackbird sounds a little mysterious and atmospheric. These titles give the opportunity to set the mood and the tone even before the readers open the book. Another thing we know about fantasy is that world building is essential. Readers are looking for escapism as they're reading this genre. So I noticed a couple of the titles have very specific kind of geographical terms. We have the map of the other lands and somewhere beyond the sea. So using places as a title could be a really interesting way to grab a reader's attention. Next, we have science fiction. A lot of these titles had a cosmic and technological theme, which makes sense for sci-fi, and that's why they're a good use of those titles because it immediately flags for potential readers that they are in the science fiction category. Some common terms that showed up were time, orbital, moon, extinction, stardust. Incorporating these words gives a hint that there's going to be space involved or at least some technological aspects. There were also a couple of one-word titles like orbital and extinction. Science fiction generally tackles some pretty big ideas, so having a one-word title can be bold and thought-provoking. Speaking of big ideas, some of these titles screamed philosophical or existential to me. So The Mystery of Time suggests kind of a deep exploration of humanity's question about time. The Mercy of Gods implies a theme of morality, power, and human struggle. So these two titles do a lot of work for the book just by being more philosophical. The other thing I noticed about these science fiction titles is that they're a bit apocalyptic or high stakes. We have Extinction, which bluntly conveys a threat, or The Other Valley, which suggests a hidden or alternate world, potentially apocalyptic or dystopian. Since science fiction can often deal with large-scale catastrophes, having these types of titles can be helpful for setting the tone about what the book is about. Okay, let's take a look at some horror titles. Here, there's a lot of ambiguity and intrigue. And mostly what I mean by that is it gets the potential reader asking questions. We have Incidents Around the House. What incidents? Why are they terrifying? What feasts at night? It suggests a lurking danger, and it asks questions about what kind of monster or thing is feasting. We Used to Live Here implies abandonment or nostalgia, so they often are hinting at some danger or unease. Now, of course, since we're in horror, we have some dark imagery and more sensory type language. The eyes are the best part. It's very disturbing and visceral, so we can guess this is probably some body horror. You Like It Darker uses darker to evoke some more emotional or foreboding tone. What Feasts at Night is more like dangerous, and the feasting implies something predatory. All of these are thriving on some unsettling visuals. There were a couple here that focused on nighttime and fear of the unknown. Night is always a great setting for horror, so we know that these two books are going to focus on that element. And we also had a couple titles that focused on some unsettling domesticity. So we have Incidents Around the House or We Used to Live Here. So focusing on home and how that's going to bring some horrific things for the characters. Next, we have Young Adult Fantasy. And I noticed a lot of these felt emotionally charged. And the examples that I pulled for that are Heartless Hunter, Ruthless Vows, Reckless, and All This Twisted Glory. YA fantasy readers are generally drawn to high stakes emotions and morally complex characters. So these adjectives help to convey some strong emotion, conflict, or some moral things that the characters are going to have to encounter. A couple of the titles had an emphasis on legacy and power. So we have Heir, as well as The Prisoner's Throne. YA fantasy is a lot about destinies, so having this emphasis on power and discovering certain elements of themselves can be a really clear sign that something is YA. And just like in adult fantasy, sometimes there's an emphasis on hidden worlds. The examples for those are Wisteria, Where the Library Hides, and Don't Let the First In, as this implies that there'll be some sort of transportation of readers to fantastical settings. These titles had an emphasis on the character's identity, which is something that's very common in YA, is you're really focused on the protagonist and their transition and growth throughout the book. We have The Heartless Hunter, Defiant, and Air. And we also have a lot of short, one-word memorable titles. Air, Reckless, Defiant, and Wisteria. The final category I'm going to take a look at is Romantasy, everyone's new favorite genre. And a lot of these focus on the high-stakes relationships elements of these books, which makes sense since it favors the romance side of plot. We have The Apprentice to the Villain, A Fate Inked in Blood, and A Touch of Chaos. All of these provoke intensity and high stakes, so they work really well for this genre. There's also a focus on magic and mythical imagery. Phantasma, The Spell Shop, and When the Moon Hatched. So we can expect these books to have some element of magic to them. There's a couple titles that really focus on fate and destiny. We have A Fate Inked in Blood and Born of Blood and Salt. Fate and destiny are staples of Romantasy, often driving characters toward love, sacrifice, or adventure. So these titles really emphasize that theme. And finally, we get hints of some morally complex characters. So again, here's The Apprentice to the Villain and A Touch of Chaos. They kind of suggest that there's romance tied to power and danger or some sort of disruption. Romantasy often features morally gray or dangerous characters, especially love interests. So these titles imply that complexity and add to the tension and intrigue that a potential reader might be interested in. So that's a glimpse into how you could perform your own marketplace research. Just go on Amazon or Goodreads, look at the top selling books in your genre, take a look at specific comps for your book, and see if there's any sort of themes or anything that sticks out about those titles to you. And that can help guide you to a title that is the right fit for your book. And if you're still in the development stage of your book, I am a developmental editor and book coach, and I have spots open if you're interested in working with me. I'll have a link to my application below, which will lead us to a free 15-minute discovery call to see if I'd be the right fit for your project. Thank you for watching, and happy writing.